Have you ever looked back in life and wished you could go back and tell your 15-year-old self, your 18-year-old self, or maybe your 20-year-old self to start doing something that, had they started that back then, would have drastically changed your life today? I think anybody who's probably in their 30s or older has done that at least once, but more likely many, many times. Welcome back to this channel. If you're new here, my name is Chris. For almost 2 years, I've been on a journey of personal development and a quest to live the more intentional life. And I can tell you that if I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self just half of the things I've learned in the last 2 years of my personal development journey, my life would be drastically different. So let's talk about it. You know, whenever anybody thinks about this topic, it's usually looking back with regret. If I wish I had have done, or if I had only known this. But today I want to think about this a little bit different. I want to think about this looking forward. 20 years from now, what would that version of yourself wish that he could come back to today and to tell you? At the time of this recording, I'm 43 years old. So I can tell you there are many things I wish I could have gone back and told my 20-year-old self that, had I done them or had I known them, my life would be dramatically different than it is today. There are habits I wish I had developed, skills I wish I had learned, or behaviors I wish I had adopted back then so that I could be in a different position, in a completely different place than I am today. If that's the case, if there are habits I could have developed, skills I could have learned, and behaviors I could have adopted 20 some years ago that in my 20s that would drastically have changed my life today, then it stands to reason that today there are habits I could develop, skills I could learn, and behaviors I could adopt that could dramatically change my life 20 years from now. Now, I know none of us know the future. I know that none of us know exactly how long we're going to have on this earth. But if you think about it, from my 20s till now is just a little over 20 years. A little over 20 years from now, I'll be 65. Now, 65 is not just possible, it's very probable I'll live that long. And with some of the changes that I'm making in my journey of living the more intentional life where my health is concerned, it's very probable I could live into my 70s or even 80s. And so I have time to make changes today that would drastically change my future. Now, there are some things you can't get back. Once they're gone, they're gone. Maybe you look back at a younger version of yourself and you say, I wish I could go back and I could tell that version of myself to cherish the times when our children were little. Maybe they were 2 to 5 years old and life was brand new to them, and they're learning new things every single day, and it's amazing the things they pick up. And you wish you could go back to your previous self and say, cherish those times. They're precious and they're far too fleeting. Well, maybe you can't do that. But what if the version of yourself 20 years from now would want to come back and say, hey, those times when your kids are teenagers, when it seemed tough, cherish those times. Those times are precious. When they're starting to date, maybe they get their first broken heart. Maybe they're learning to drive. Cherish those times. Maybe you're older and maybe your kids are starting their own family. Cherish those times. All of these times with our family is precious. They're precious and they're cherishable in different ways, but don't have your future self regret where you are now because you regret what you did in the past. Now you might be thinking, yeah, that's easy now because hindsight's 2020. The only reason I know my regrets from my 20s is because I'm in my 40s. But I have not been to my 60s, so how am I supposed to know the things that I could be doing now so that my future self has no regrets? Well, that's a true statement, but here's some things you can do. Number one, the things that you wish you could tell your 20-year-old self, can your 40-year-old self be doing them? You know, if you wish you could go back and tell your 20-year-old self, I wish I would have told myself and be investing 10% of your income into index funds. How much money could I have of 20 years of investing my income? Well, are you investing 10% of your income now into index funds? Like I said, so many people look back and they have the regret, but they think now it's too late. Well, the same amount of investments and wealth you could have built from 20 to 40 is the same amount you could build from 40 to 60 or 40 to 70. So are you doing that right now? If you wish you could go back and tell your 20-year-old self, Don't focus so much on the career. Career is important, but it is not the most important thing. Make sure you're enjoying life. Make sure you're having adventures. Well, are you having adventures now? Or are you still focused on career because you think you're too locked in now? Don't let your 65-year-old self look back and say, I still had so much energy. I still had so much life. Why didn't I use it when I knew that that is something I should have done? But here's something else you can do. You can actually take the time to imagine what your life would look like in 20 years. Don't just think about it, but imagine you're there 20 years from now. What do you want your life to look like? And what would you need to start today to get to that? Thinking and imagining is not the same thing. You could think about what you want, but you're going to be limited in knowing what's there. But if you would stop and take time to imagine yourself there, and actually look around in your imagination and what you want, then you can imagine what that version of yourself would want to tell you today. Some people think, well, Chris, that's just way too childish. Well, I don't think the imagination is childish. I've said in the past, I believe in God. I believe that He created us. And I believe the imagination is a faculty that was given to us by God for a purpose. And there's nothing childish about using your imagination. Now, you can use your imagination in a childish way, but there's nothing childish about you thinking and imagining yourself in a future place, in a different state than you are now, and envisioning that. Now, why is that important to do that? Why is that better than just thinking about it? I believe that when you use the God-given ability to imagine yourself in a situation that you currently don't have, but that you'd like to have, that I believe it engages your soul. I believe it engages your emotions and your desires for that thing differently than if you were just thinking about it. But now, if you still think imagination is too childish, that's fine. We can use the more mature term, which is visualize. Visualization is a big thing in the personal development realm, and sometimes the way people talk about it, it seems to be kind of out there and mystical. There's nothing out there and mystical about visualization, and visualization is just using your imagination. And the reason it's so powerful is because when you use your imagination, or when you visualize yourself having something you don't currently have, you're engaging those emotions and those desires for that thing differently than just thinking about it. And so you have a higher degree, or a higher possibility of achieving that things, because you have engaged your desires for it. And the more you visualize or imagine yourself with that thing, the more you desire it, the more likely you are to get it. That's all visualization is. And so we can use that God-given faculty of imagination to say 20 years from now, what do I want my life to look like? Imagining myself in that position, engaging those desires for that. And then I can even imagine what would 65-year-old Chris wish he could come back and tell 40-year-old Chris, start this now. And then I can begin to do that. And because I've engaged my desires for it, I'm much more likely to achieve it. Again, I look back on my 20s with regrets. Not a lot of them, thankfully, but there are definitely things I could have done, and the behaviors, the habits, the skills, that had I done them, my life would be drastically different today. And here's the thing, all of those things that I wish I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self, it's not like these are out of the realm of possibility for me to know in my 20s. The issue was I wasn't intentional to be looking at them. But I don't want to get to 65 and look back at my 40s with the same regrets, because I wasn't intentional today to say, what do I need to do? What habits do I need to develop? What skills do I need to learn? What behaviors do I need to adopt so that my 65-year-old self has no regrets? I believe if you take this video to heart, it'll help you today. It'll help you to have no regrets in the future. And if it did help you, I ask that you share, like, and subscribe this video. If you want to learn more about living the intentional life, you can click on this playlist here. But until I see you again, go out and live that more intentional life.